Welcome on in. WIP Daily, Joe Giglio with you. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following the podcast. Of course, our video feed here, 94 WIP. Check it out, subscribe. Ton of video content on the feed. And when we do these video podcasts, Tucker Bagley will join me in a few minutes, give his thoughts on this. I'm curious where he's at because, so today I woke up, a little more optimism in my head. This, of course, is before ridiculous traffic. I can't be the only one this week. I don't know what's going on here. I figured there'd be less people on the road before the holidays, but I guess that's not it. Everyone's going to the office. Anyway, I digress. Back to the Eagles here. As I did think some more optimistically about the team. And look, we know the issues are here. The defense, without question, is one of the worst right now in the NFL. But big picture, I do feel there are some reasons to feel like they're going to be okay and they're going to figure this thing out between now and really when they have to, and that is part of it. So let me run through some thoughts on why I think this whole thing and this whole operation is going to end up okay. Is it going to end up where we want it to, which is in a Super Bowl in Las Vegas? Right now, my gut instinct is no, but things can change in the next 6 weeks. All right, so number one, and the biggest thing, and the biggest reason why the Eagles are going to be okay is the schedule makers, which were very tough on them throughout the season, but essentially the last 5 or 6 weeks have been really tough on the Eagles while being easy on a team like the Dallas Cowboys. But now it reverses. And you look at the Eagles' schedule down the stretch of the season, they face 4 defenses that are not very good. Obviously, 3 teams with the Giants in there twice. And they face 4 teams that are not very good. Now, do I think the Seattle Giants, Arizona Giants thing is as easy as it looked 8 weeks ago? Probably not, because the Giants have a little bit of life at this moment. It's a division opponent. And Arizona's been, I think, more game this year than they have just swat them away and they're a joke, especially with Kyler Murray back now. But the bottom line is the Eagles will be favored significantly, I would say, in 3 of the 4 games. And they're certainly going to be favored in all 4. Right now, they're about a 3.5-point favorite in Seattle next Monday night. They should win that football game. Are they going to? I'll have a pick and a more stronger feeling as the week goes on. It's going to be challenging, very challenging, but they're favored to win the game. They'll be favored by, 10.5 points to beat the Giants at home on Christmas. They'll be favored to beat the Cardinals probably by 9 or 10 or 11 on New Year's Eve. And then going to the Giants' last game of the season, we'll see where everyone is in the standings and what the reality is in Week 18, but they'll be favored by well over a touchdown in that game too. So they should be able to get back on track because they're playing bad teams that do not have a lot going for them, and teams that they are just better than roster-wise. That's big. The other side of this is the Dallas Cowboys have a really difficult stretch coming up, specifically the next 3 games, but I'll even give you a reason for the 4th game. And look, I think it is a fool's errand to just assume the Cowboys are going to lose because they're probably better than every team they're going to play, but it's the cumulative effect. It's like what we just saw with the Eagles. Were the Eagles worse in particular than some of the teams they played? Or better, probably not. But there's a cumulative effect of playing those teams week in, week out. And it's why I thought, are the Eagles 20 points worse than the Cowboys? I don't think it's that bad. But when you throw that on the back end of all the games they faced in between, and then you throw the rest factor in, it looked worse. So with the Cowboys now, they just played the beginning of this. They just played the Eagles. All right, they got that one. Now they go to Buffalo on Sunday. They're underdogs in that game. Actually, they're going to beat Buffalo on Sunday because if you look at the Cowboys over the years, specifically they're better at home, but they're also better on turf. I think this is actually this one they could get in Buffalo against the Bills off an emotional win. The next week, though, they go to Miami, and Miami's going to need that one to try to stay afloat for the number 1 seed in the AFC, and that game's going to be on grass down in Miami. That feels like a tough challenge, back-to-back road games for the Cowboys. Then they'll come home, they'll play the Lions. I think they'll beat them in Dallas. But then the last game of the season, again, another road game. So 3 of the next 4 on the road for Dallas. And that in Washington is on grass. And we know they struggled there in the last season. So it's pretty likely Dallas will lose 1 of these games. Are they going to lose 2? Probably not. So as long as the Eagles don't lose 2, they're likely still to be a division winner and get a top 2 seed. I mean, that's pretty darn good. So that's number 1. The schedule is in the Eagles' favor by a lot. Number 2. The path to divisional round weekend, and that's when I truly believe the Eagles, look about it from the Phillies' perspective. Last season, did what they did in April, May, June, July really matter? It didn't. The bottom line is they needed to be ready to go for October. And they did. They were. I mean, they got themselves ready, and they were playing their best baseball when October began. They figured stuff out when October began, and again, another run began like we saw 2 Octobers ago. Not quite as great, but similar. And with the Eagles, I mean, I can make a real case. They're not going to face a real challenge for 6 weeks. We're not going to know. None of this is going to matter. And they're going to find their way to figure this out for the next 5 weeks. And then the 6th week is what matters. And what I mean by that is Seattle, Giants, Arizona, Giants. Regardless of how this plays out, and I mean that, the Eagles are going to the playoffs. And almost regardless, they're pretty much in a situation where they're going to be the 2 seed or they're going to be the 5 seed. But I guess they could be the 3. If they struggle, Dallas struggles, they still win the division, but Detroit jumps them. But whatever. They are going to be very likely the 2 seed or the 5 seed. You look at ESPN's analytics and they have like the percentage chance to get all of the different seeds. And right now, San Francisco clearly the favorite to get the 1. The Eagles right now are the favorite to get the 2. And then the most likely scenario for the Eagles, if not the 2, would probably be the 5 with Dallas overtaking them, and they get the 2. So just play this out for a second. Seattle, Giants, Arizona, Giants. That's the next 4 weeks. Then let's go to week 5, which would be the first round of the playoffs. Let's say the Eagles are not the number 1 seed. So they have to play, regardless of their seed, they're playing on wild card weekend. That seems like a pretty fair bet right now. Think about who the opponents are going to be in that game. If they're the 2 seed, it's some combination. It's one of these teams. It's either a team like the Minnesota Vikings, who are starting Nick Mullins at quarterback this Saturday. It's the Los Angeles Rams, who have certainly played better football over the past 6-7 weeks since the last time the Eagles played them. I think they are very well coached, but they're not very good. They're not super talented. The Eagles will be big favorites to beat them at home. Or the Green Bay Packers, who I think are the most dangerous of the potential 7 seeds, but they're young, very young, especially on the offensive side of football. And Jordan Love, for as good as he's looked at times, has been up and down. He's been better at home than he's been better on the road. And I don't view them as a team that would be very likely to come in here and win. Could they be dangerous? Yes. But we're talking about the Vikings, the Rams, and the Packers as potential first-round opponents if the Eagles are in the 2 seed. If they're in the 7 seed, if they're in the 5 seed, and they lose the division and the Cowboys overtake them, it's likely a trip to Atlanta, Tampa Bay, who they already beat by 14 and beat pretty easily, even though they didn't play their best football in week 3. New Orleans. I mean, that game, the Eagles are 7.5, 8-point road favorites. So I think the reality is the Eagles have 5 weeks to figure this out. In the 6th week, that's when the Eagles season starts again. This is all for the next 5 weeks, just a warm-up to division round weekend. I'll be surprised if the Eagles aren't playing on division round weekend. And that is, even though I have major concerns with the team, coaching, defense, it's the state of the NFC. There are 4 teams above everyone. Even though the Lions and Eagles have come back to the pack, I still believe they're above the fray because, as you saw with a team like Green Bay on Monday, they're young and they're up and down. And then the South stinks. So I still think they're going to be in that division round weekend. Everything between now and then tells me they have 5 weeks to get their act together because that's the test, whether it is a trip to San Francisco, a trip to Dallas, hosting the Lions, however the field breaks, they're going to have to be, play an A game or at least a B+ game if it's the Lions, but an A game if it's Dallas or San Francisco to have a shot to get back to the NFC Championship game. So that's it. Like, time is on the Eagles side. Schedule is on the Eagles side. And the offense and offensive players and personnel are on the Eagles side. Now, part of my optimism with the offense moving forward is they're going to play some not so good defenses the next 4 weeks, and then probably the 5th week as well. Although Atlanta's defense, if you look at a potential 5 seed, Atlanta's defense is pretty darn good. Maybe one of the more underrated units in the NFL. But the Saints, the Bucks, even the Falcons, who I think are pretty good, that they shouldn't put up that much resistance. And if it's the Lions here in the divisional round, their defense might be worse than the Eagles right now, or right on par, just not doing enough on defense. So they're not going to play great defenses until they see Dallas or San Francisco again. And this offense, for as much it's been choppy, and I know Tucker has some thoughts on what's going on in first down and all their issues to move the ball efficiently offensively this year compared to last year, they're healthy on offense. And they have immense playmakers everywhere at the quarterback position, tight end who's back now in Goddard, the 2 wide receivers, the offensive line is healthy. If you tell me that they stay healthy for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, I'm going to bet on them to score some points. A lot of their issues this year have been turnovers, especially turnovers over the 50-yard line, like drive-killing turnovers, 3 of them on Sunday night against Dallas. If you take away those 3 and you add a touchdown and 2 more field goals, they still lose. But all of a sudden we're thinking like, oh, they lost 33-26. It's a different kind of football game, and we're not as down. It's more like, man, they didn't cash in and get in the end zone rather than this thing's a mess. I mean, they're still – you look at a lot of their offensive metrics, it's still a top 10 offense. It's not as good as it was last year, but it's still a top 10 offense. It's about to go up against some below average defenses. The offense gives me hope they could figure this thing out. And the last thing, along with time on their side, the schedule, how the playoffs will play out before divisional round weekend, and just the talent on the offensive side, is they're a team of winners. They have winners. I mean, this is adversity we haven't seen with this group in a long time. But I'm going to bet on Hurts and Devontae and Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey and Brandon Graham and all these guys to figure it out. They might be too flawed to hoist the Lombardi this year, and there just might be too much turnover in coaching and personnel on defense and schemes getting figured out on offense. But there's a feeling like this thing could go off the rails. I saw an article on ESPN yesterday. Can the Eagles avoid a collapse? I think they can avoid that. I have optimism that we're going to walk in a division round weekend with some hope that they have figured some things out. And then we'll find out then. But, Tucker, what do you feel on this? It's obviously gut check time for the Eagles. I don't love the way this is going, but I also think they do have time on their side to figure things out before the real challenges start up again.
It's certainly not trending in the right direction after the last 2 weeks. And maybe there's a world where had they lost the last 2 games, but it was a little bit more competitive, we would have felt better about this team. But you're right. I mean, they have a lot of time to figure it out. You have 4 games in the rest of the regular season. You're probably going against a backup quarterback this week in Drew Lock in Seattle. And then you have the Giants twice and the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, those are 4 very winnable games that if you do take care of business, no matter what, you're at least going to be the 2 seed. But I just think this offense has a lot of things to worry about. And defensively, all the things they did well last year, they're not doing well this year. Your top 2 cornerbacks aren't playing that well. You're not getting after the passer nearly as much as you did a year ago. But that's also might be because simply they're not building big leads. Like I think the slow starts that this team has been going through, not just in recent weeks. I know they talk about, well, look how good our first 2 drives were against San Francisco. Doesn't matter, right? Like you didn't score. The offense stalled in the red zone. Did the same thing against Dallas. You moved the ball and then Hurts fumbled. And then the other drive where A.J. Brown got the offensive pass interference and that kind of threw everything out of whack there. I mean, the thing that this team did really well last year was they put teams away at halftime. I looked it up earlier in the week. They scored 20 points in 10 different games in the first half last year. They haven't done it once this year. Like I think the most they've scored this year is 17. That's it. And they scored 24 quite a few times last year. And this is a team that last year outscored opponents by 120 in the first half. They've been outscored by 30 in the first half this year. That's a 150-point difference in first half performance. And I think that comes down to game planning. It comes down to Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni kind of figuring things out and putting together a game plan that they can execute and get more than just 3 people involved in the passing game. But you're right. They certainly have the time to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions and a lot of people maybe overreacting to how the last 2 weeks have gone. But, I mean, for a team that came into the season with Super Bowl aspirations and, we got to take care of what we couldn't do last year. I mean, right now, after the last 2 weeks, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who has them in the top 2 of the conference, let alone atop the conference like they were 2 weeks ago.
I agree. I mean, and that's fair. All that's fair. All the worry is fair. Here is sometimes the reality versus our concerns, like you got to marry them, right? And the concerns are real, but this is the way I view this. There is I'd say a better than 50% chance that the path plays out like this. They win 3 of their final 4. Maybe they lose in Seattle on Monday. We just lose our minds. But then they win the last 3 against tomato cans, okay? Dallas loses 1, let's say, in Miami. That puts the Eagles as the number 2 seed, and they get the division title. And they play the Rams or let's say they play the Vikings with Nick Mullins at quarterback in round 1. And then they get the Lions on the road with a poor defense in round 2. I like the Lions. I don't think that would be an easy game, but Jared Goff outside, the Lions defense, Eagles probably win that one. And all of a sudden, they're in the NFC Championship game after San Francisco and Dallas had to play each other on the other side of the bracket. So as much as there is concern, the path from right where we sit right now to the Eagles in an NFC Championship game, either home against Dallas or in San Francisco in 7 weeks, it's certainly possible. I mean, is it likely? I'd say it's about a 50-50 chance it plays out very similar to the way I just did it. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following WIP Daily. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't forget the 94 WIP YouTube page. Subscribe, check it out. We'll talk soon.